So welcome for this evening in Nørderiet, as we call it in Danish. I don't know, the translation would be something like Geek Lab, where we pick up small topics and have a closer look at it, what's within the coaching area. I'm extremely happy that we have Amina here today, and she will present herself in just a little second. Because to me, I know her as a team coach and as a very experienced one. So I was very curious when I saw the new team coaching competencies that ICF have made. So I asked her, have you seen them? And she said, of course I've seen them. I'm just in the middle of translating them for the Hungarian chapter that she's a member of. And I asked her, couldn't you come here and talk about them, introduce them, but do it from a point of view as a team coach? What does that mean for you? And not just what does that mean for ICF. So from a more practitioner point of view, but still an introduction to what does it mean? What do they aim for? So that's the meaning with our meeting to this evening. You will have a little bit of interaction along the way, but otherwise Amina will get you through this 1 hour of hopefully high inspiration and some new knowledge. Amina, may I leave the word to you?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jesper. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciated your invitation because this topic is very close to my heart, and I will tell you why in just a minute. But I really feel honored to be able to talk to all of you, hopefully in some way, shape or form here. Slightly interactively as much as possible in this hour about these new team coaching competencies from ICF. So how is this topic relevant and why did I give this title to our 1 hour conversation here today? I have an international background. I was born in Africa. I lived in the US for many years. I also lived in Hungary, and now I'm living in Hungary again. And so from each background, there's a lot of culture and cultural diversity that follows me around. And I think working with teams, that's something that we always face, right? Cultural diversity. Even if it's a team coming from the same national culture, there's always some kind of interculturality that we have to be aware of and that we work with. And for me, that's always exciting. It's also a little scary because there's a lot of stuff in there, but very exciting and inspiring. And then when I think about teams and I think about our work here today, partnership is something that I've been learning for all my life, how to partner with anybody really. And I think that's quite a lifelong journey to learn to be a good partner. And in team coaching, this has a special meaning because we're partnering on various levels, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So I felt very personal about this topic, especially that I was in the middle of translating these competencies. So they were very, very close to my fingertips as Jesper asked me if I could talk about them. Let me share my screen here. So you see what I see. Do you see what I see? Can everybody see it now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, yes. Jesper, I appreciate it. Okay, so I would like to ask Jesper, first of all, to follow time and let me know if I get carried away, because I don't want to keep anybody longer than our 1 hour time frame. And also, please put anything in the chat that you find important, questions, reflections, anything, so we can work with that, as there are probably quite a few of us on the call here. I would like to make sure that we have some kind of interaction, although we will be working in in breakout rooms for a little bit as well. So please don't hesitate to put any questions, anything in the chat. How do we partner here with each other today? All questions are welcome, like I said. And one thing that's really important for me is that this is more of an exploration of team coaching competencies and how we understand them. Validation, and when I say validation, how do I validate that in my work, and what does that how does that resonate with you as you have your own experiences? And curiosity, which is always the most important. So let's make sure that we're more curious and more exploring rather than knowledge sharing in this 1 hour. I am a team coach practitioner practicing this profession. And so I would love to get some experiences from you as well, so we can all leave here being a little bit more enriched about what these competencies are and what they mean for us. And coming from a TA background, we're all responsible for our personal learning and well-being. So if there's anything that you need from me, if you don't hear me, if you don't see the slides, if you have a question, please make sure that you let me know or let Jesper know so we can respond. Here's our short agenda for today. My brief introduction in just a few words. I've been working as a coach for about 12 years now, but way before that, I used to really enjoy working with groups. As I was reflecting on this, I realized that I was growing up in communist Hungary, and we had a lot of youth groups during that time. That was what was available to us. And I absolutely loved going to these youth groups and these summer camps because we got to work in teams. And for me, that was always the best environment, the best way to work. And then later I was working with these teams, helping them, facilitating them, leading them. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I'm realizing now that this some form of group teamwork has always been around in my life. I have 3 basically adult children, and I'm practicing on them all the time. They would have long stories to tell you about working with groups and teams, and also coaching in general. And I work with a lot of organizations, both with groups, teams, as well as with individual leaders. Just a few short thoughts about ICF and how these team coaching competencies came to be. You are well aware that ICF has the new core competencies. And after that, it's been a long process where ICF has been considering coming up with some kind of a way to regulate or to formulate what competencies team coaches need. And so they did something very similar to what they did with the core competencies. They sent out questionnaires and asked a huge body of coaches, something like 1,500 coaches, about what they think team coaches need and what kind of competencies they think. And there are a lot of different questions in that. And so they did quite a bit of research on it. And then they put together focus groups and worked with them. And then they put together a team of, I think, 25 global, very experienced coaches who then sat down over long hours and went through all the material that they gathered. And through various workshops, they came up with the formula that we have today. And I believe it is still a piece of work that's still forming. Right now, this is what we have, but I'm sure that there will be different versions of it down the road as we all start working with it and validating it and giving feedback on it. So I would like to ask Jesper to create small groups, breakout rooms, possibly of 4 people in each room, And I would like to ask you just for a few minutes to discuss this topic of what does it mean for you to partner with a team? What kind of ideas, thoughts come up when you reflect on this notion of partnering with a team? And I'm going to stop share here. We're trying to use our 8 minutes. So while we're waiting maybe for a couple of people to come back, I'd like to share my screen. I think probably most of you are familiar with Mentimeter and how Mentimeter works. Jesper, could you put the code in the chat for everybody to see?
I do it. I don't know if you all know Mentimeter, but I put the link in here first.
What you need to do is open the link on your phone, probably, and put in the code that you see in the chat, or you probably see it on the screen now as well. And when you get there, it says, what are the 3 most important words? But I only want to ask you for one word. Okay, what is the one most important word that describes partnership with a team for you? Just reflect for a minute on your conversation and put in one word that you feel is an important word to describe partnership. Let's see where we are. Can you see the word cloud you're creating? Trust is in the middle. Dynamic tension, third identity, safe, many systems, flexibility, listening, humbleness, curiosity, beautiful words. Goals, commitment, safety, psychological safety, curiosity, engagement, dynamics, contracting. Great. Still have some voting time, but I think I'm going to close it off so we can continue. Right. If you'd like to take a picture of the word cloud, you can do it now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to stop sharing here. So you entered a lot of words that will be coming up here as we talk about the competencies. I'm just trying to get my PowerPoint so you can see it. Okay, can everybody see it now? Jesper, yes. Can you be my, yeah. Thank you. Okay. So the first thing that really impresses me about these competencies and what ICF put together, like I said, they worked really hard, did research and put a lot of work into this. And what they realized was that when we talk about team coaching, actually we talk about so many things. It's difficult to really put your finger on what is it exactly. And so in the end, they decided to put together a chart. And if you open up the ICF document that we can download, you'll see the chart of all the different ways that we can, different modalities that we can use to develop teams. And this really helped me because a lot of times when we get invited in to work with a team, the clients, I don't know about you, but here in Hungary, clients are not necessarily very clear about what they want, right? So they'll call us in to do a training, to do a team coaching, to do team building day. And then when we start to have a conversation, realize it might be something completely different, what they really mean by that label, by that name. And so in this chart, it gives us a fairly clear idea of how team development can be structured and what are the different phases. And team coaching is only the last, most complex phase of developing a team. According to ICF, this is usually a long-term process, and so we contract for 6 months to a year, sometimes even longer than that. Obviously, depending on different ways of working, this could be shorter, and there are a lot of ways to intervene. But the process itself of developing a team is usually a longer process. And so these are just the different modalities that we find in this chart. When we are building teams, we use mostly exercises. When we train, we have a curriculum that we deliver. When we're consulting, then we share our expertise. When we are called in as a mentor, we share our knowledge and we share experience. Team facilitation is about facilitating dialogue with a team. And team coaching is partnering with the team. And when we get to team coaching, by the time we get to team coaching, we usually have done some or all of the above. And the question is whether we do that ourselves or we call in other people to work with us in these different modalities. But I think this is a really handy chart for us to have a map, to kind of understand and be clear about what we're doing in which part of this process and how are we putting that all together. So we don't call everything team coaching. That might be a completely different modality. So another really important aspect of the competencies is that ICF realized that team coaches need to use the exact same 8 core competencies that ICF came up with before. So they didn't want to do away with those competencies. They said, we need these 8 competencies. Team coaches need additional competencies that supplement the core competencies. So really, we don't have separate team coaching competency, a separate competency list. What we have is our core competencies supplemented with some additional aspects that are there for team coaches. So basically, here's partnership again, right? ICF team coaching competencies are not separate, but work in partnership with the individual core competencies. So you see how partnership is a really key, not just a key word, but a key concept in our work when we consider ICF and team coaching. Oops. So let's see if this is willing to continue. So our first competency here, which in the core competency model says demonstrates ethical practice, is just as important, obviously, when we talk about teams. And there are 4 different things here that 4 different aspects that ICF came up with. And maybe the most important one is that when we work with a team, we need to be able to hold the team as a single entity. Even though we work with the individual members, but we always have to be aware of the team as a unity, as a single entity. Another important thing is that, like we saw in the chart, it's important for us to be able to distinguish between all these different modalities and know which one we're working from. And if we have the competencies for each one, then we can switch hats, so to speak, between these modalities. But if not, then it's important for us to call in a mentor or call in a consultant in that phase of the team development program. So these are all created or used by experts and not mixed up in terms of what methodology we're using at which time. And I would like to give you an example from my experience of how this shows up in my work, and hopefully that will help us talk a little bit about these competencies each. Here, I was working with a CEO. Usually I get called in through my individual work with leaders. And this CEO had been my client for a while, and he came with a private issue. This was a family-owned company, and there was some difficulty amongst the family members owning this company. And so he came to me for coaching about that. And as we were working at a certain point, he brought in the team into our conversations, and more he was talking about his interaction with the team and how his leadership was affecting the team. And at a certain point, he asked me if I would come in as a coach for the team. And at this point, I had to, I was obviously very excited and I was happy to work with them, but I had to stop and reflect for a minute, and then open up a conversation with him around the topic of just being aware that so far I've been following him and his success on his journey. If I come in as a team coach, my main client will be the team as a unit, and he will be part of that team. And so for me, it's really important to make sure that he understands that I'm not going to be his right hand or the executioner of what he wants to do to the team, but I will be the partnering with the team, and that will give us a different kind of relationship. And so we had to renegotiate, so to speak, our contract to make sure that this is all transparent, and he was fine with that. But that's one example that where it's important for us when we step from individual coach to team coach to reframe who we are contracting with and who we're representing. And I think often leaders might expect us to do something to their team, and we need to make sure to be very clear about how we contract, that we're not going to do anything to their team. We're going to be partnering with the team, including the leader, for whatever developmental journey they're ready to go through. Oops. Okay, why are you? Here we go. So the second competency talks about embodying a coaching mindset, which is one of my favorite competencies. And I think many of you would agree that this is really great that this entered into our core competencies list, and also into the team supplement list. And here, for me, supervision is probably the key. You can see there's only 2 points here that are in addition to our core competencies coaching mindset description. And one is supervision for support, development, and accountability. And while I think supervision is really key, even when working with individuals, as a team coach, I think it's just an absolute must, because team coaching is so complex. There are so many interests, and so often we get into a situation where there are various interests clashing with each other. When we think systematically, just the organization, the individual, the team as a unit, a lot of different energies, dynamics. And so for us to really be able to stay in our middle, to stay neutral, objective, and yet empathetic and getting close enough to the team, but yet being far away enough to have a view to be able to reflect. all these things make it really complex. And so I'm really a big advocate for supervision, and I'm very glad that this entered into our competencies list. Remaining objective and aware of team dynamics and patterns. In this team that I just mentioned to you, they were very used to working individually. They were working usually in silos, these leaders. This is a leadership of seven people. They were working in silos and they weren't used to connecting. And so when we started working, it was very important to really reflect back the dynamics that I was noticing as they were working together, so that they can become aware and start rebuilding those relationships to become a team. And I think this might be also an important point. Not so far, I've always said team, but actually not every group is a team right off, right? So when we start working with them, often they're groups and not teams. And so the question is, do they really need to become a team? And if so, then what is the process through which they will be engaging as a team? And I think a lot of our work is around this question of whether they need to become a team, and if so, how, what process is there for that? In our, it seems like, did I skip one? Let's see. No, okay, good. Here we go. So competency number 3, establishing and maintaining agreements. Something very obvious, right? We talk a lot about contracting in individual coaching and in team coaching. But in team coaching, we need to make it very clear what team coaching is and how it fits into this chart of all the different development modalities. And here I brought you another example where I got called in to work with a team. And usually when this happens, the wording is, oh, we want some team coaching. And I said, okay, but first we need to, I like to do some preparatory work. So I either hold interviews or there's a questionnaire depending on how people work and what's easier. They respond to certain questions and send it back to me. And then I work with the responses and gather some data. And then we can sit down and reflect on, okay, where are we in terms of how this group of people are together right now, and what is the direction, where would they like to get to? And first we create usually a kickoff workshop. In this case, this was a 2-day workshop where we actually design how we are going to work together and what the process will be, and what is the goal of this process. And so a lot of times the difficulty is to contract for these initial phases before we can really get into the coaching part. But it's very important to do that, because that's where we get the team and the individual members to engage. And in this case, in this 2-day kickoff, the members who were very skeptical because they had quite a few consultants before, and they didn't have very good experiences. The energy lifted quite a bit when they were sitting in this in these workshops and designing their own team development process. And we were co-creating how this team is going to go through this process and where they would like to get to all together. And in every step of the way, creating agreements and maintaining it with the team as a unity, not just the leader, in my experience, seems to be quite a powerful process in terms of engaging the team members towards the team development in general. Of course, here we also need to make sure that we talk to various stakeholders, and if we have a co-coach, if we're lucky enough to have a co-coach, I think it's fantastic to work in pairs when we're team coaching, because there is so much to notice, so much data to process, so much complexity, that it really helps, especially when we have to do this online, which lately, obviously, we all have to in most cases. It really makes a huge difference to have a partner and be able to work together as a partner. So in my experience, that makes a big difference. And we also then can model how we create agreements between us, the coaches, that will then help the team as well work along agreements transparently. And when we get to the next one, maintaining presence. Presence is one of the key elements we work with all the time. But when we work with a team, there is so much information, sensory and perceptual information. We need all our abilities to be able to focus on what is important to the coaching process. So when there's two of us with 4 eyes and 4 ears, it is a lot easier to share this responsibility and to really come up with perceptions that will be very useful for the team. Here I wanted to bring an example where working with an international, a company that does trading with international equipment, with very high quality equipment. And when they invited me in, they didn't want to do any preparation. They wanted me to come in and do a one-day kickoff event right away, and then jump into this team developing process. And so I was experiencing the team like face on when we first met, and it was really fascinating for me to see that this team that is working with such high quality equipment, and the equipment was all around us in the space where we were working together, but the space was so run down, so uncared for, that there was this huge gap between the equipment they were using every day and caring for and everything, and the space, their own environment, that when I reflected back to them how that impacted me, that was then it turned into a really rich conversation, and everybody could relate somehow to this kind of tension between their work and their environment. And so another one, active listening, is again something that we use all the time. But how does this show up in teams? Well, in all different layers. There are interactions between the members. There is interaction between the team as a whole and the coach. There is obviously the organization around the team that we have to listen for and have to notice and understand. Then the collective team energy is there, but we also have to make sure that we hear individual voices, verbal and nonverbal communication patterns. So again, active listening is tenfold when working with a team. So having a partner, a team coach partner, is really, really useful in this aspect as well. So because we hear so much more and we each listen from a different angle, a different direction. And obviously we can gather a lot more data that we can work with. Modeling confident effective communication and collaboration is also a lot easier when I have a partner that I can do it with. It helps the team see how our communication shows through the work we do and encourages them to be able to say things and own their dialogue that is really important and useful for them. And going on to competency number 7, evoking awareness. Well, this is what we do all the time. We evoke awareness. In the example I gave you before, that's also evoking awareness about this discrepancy, this polarity between environment and their work, the equipment they work with. But there are many examples that we can come up with. What for me is really key here is challenging team assumptions. There are so many assumptions hidden when you work with a team, and to be able to find data, reflect it back to them, and challenge those assumptions can create completely new ways of thinking for the team. One example is when I was working with a team that's a really high quality team with a lot of creativity, and the product that they're using is also a very fine, sophisticated product. This is a leadership team of 7 people. And I gave them a puzzle that they started working with. These were 2 women and 5 men. And the women immediately kind of stepped back and said, well, let the men handle this. And the 5 men, after maybe a minute or so, the leader stepped away and he said, no way, this is not possible. This is a trick. You can't solve this. And right after that, 2 or 3 other people stepped back and said, yeah, I don't think we can solve this. And in the end, there was one guy that didn't quit. And he tried and tried and tried, and everybody else was standing around looking. And he finally solved the puzzle. And as they were all looking, the leader said, wow, this is exactly what we do. He said, yeah, a lot of times we get some kind of a project and we all just step back and say, oh, we can't solve this, we can't solve this. And if there is one person, then we say, oh, he's crazy, he's crazy. Why are we wasting time on this? We need to move on. And yet a lot of times it turns out that it could be solved. We just need to allow space to think differently, to come up with some kind of a different solution, but it happens all the time in our work. And so it led to a really interesting conversation about how these assumptions that something cannot be solved, it's too hard work, too much time, too expensive, too whatever, can be questioned and changed. So that was an example where just simple awareness could shift, creating awareness could shift their thinking. And the last competency, facilitating client growth, is what it is all about. And here, who is the client? The client is the team as a unit. So when we facilitate the team's growth, we need to make sure that the dialogue is the team dialogue. And what we reflect is about the team as a unit, as a whole. And when we identify goals, we're not just talking about the leader's goals, we're identifying the goal of the team, again, as a unit. And in creating these steps towards the goals, I find it really important and helpful, although often not easy, to really engage in co-creation and allow the team to create their own path towards reaching these goals, because it makes a huge difference in engagement in the work. So I'm looking at the time and I'm noticing that we don't have a whole lot of time left, and I would love to hear your questions, remarks. anything around the topic. I don't know.
So before we stay in plenum and ask questions, I would just like you to type in the chat. Don't think too much about it. What is the most interesting thing you heard? What really triggered your curiosity when it comes to team coaching? You don't need to write everybody, but if something is on your mind, please type it in the chat. What did you find really interesting here?
Coaching supervision. Evoke awareness, for example. The distinctions, the distinctions are really, really helpful for me as well. And I refer back to them all the time. How to create a sustainable team co-coach. Yeah,
and see the team as a unit is so important.
Right. And are there any questions? I see some great reflections of what is important to you, what was most interesting to you. If anybody has any questions, please just go ahead and unmute your mic, or if you prefer, put it in the chat, either way.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
It's Helene from Denmark. In what way have you changed your team coaching practice after the team coaching competencies has been written?
Oh, I love this question. First of all, the chart of the modalities to me is really helpful. I did a training just recently with the Global Team Coaching Institute, where we went through all these different ways of working with a team. And the team coaching competencies came out right around that time. And it was so helpful for me to see those in a chart and be able to just look at it and say, where am I now? What is the next phase, or what is the first phase? How shall we start with this team? What hat am I supposed to wear? It just made things a lot clearer. And also, I think it made me a lot more conscious of which modality I am working in. So that's definitely also the partnering and working with a co-coach. For me, that's been a really inspiring part of the whole competency model, is the emphasis on using 2 team coaches when working with a team. And I had the occasion to do that a few times, and I can really, really recommend doing that and working in pairs whenever possible with a team. It is so richer, so much richer, and also we get so much more out of it. So maybe those are the 2 things that would first come to my mind that have shifted. But there's so much more in there, so I'm on the journey. There's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have time for another question.
Can I ask a question about your journey to become a team coach? Where did you start, in what way, or how did you go about it? Because there's a lot of different training courses. At the same time, it all seems like quite the big market as well. And there's so many people offering something in that area.
Right. Yeah. And I consider myself to be really, really lucky in that aspect, because when I did my executive coaching diploma with AOEC, Academy of Executive Coaching, John Leary-Joyce was here in Hungary. He was delivering that program. And so through him, I got involved in systemic team coaching. And so when I got the chance, as soon as I got the chance, I went to the US and did the certificate program. I couldn't do the diploma program, which is a year long, because you had to travel to London a lot and it just wasn't possible for me. But I did the certificate program, and I followed Peter Hawkins' work and did a lot of just reading and got his books and all that. And so that's basically what I use. I use a lot of the systemic approach, which has, by the way, changed my individual coaching approach as well quite a bit. The whole systemic thinking, that was a huge learning for me, and still is, how to address the system. And when Global Team Coaching Institute came out with the first cohort of their program, I signed up immediately because it was online. I didn't have to travel to London. Peter Hawkins and David Clutterbuck's name was 100% guarantee for me that I would learn a lot. And so I absolutely loved their program, and I highly recommend it, along with systemic team coaching, which is also fantastic. So these are the ones that I really know from personal experience. Having said that, there are lots of fantastic team coaching training programs out there. So I think we're very fortunate to be able to choose from many good ones.
Thank you. It's 8 o'clock right now. There are one question, and I know you have had probably a long day behind you, and you are tired, and now we are stressing your minds again here after evening dinner. There's one question, one last question. I don't know, I mean, if you have just 1 minute, 2 minutes, then we can finish up. And you guys that needs to log out, please do so. We will record this, and if you can stay just a couple of minutes. There's one here from Gabriela. What kind of trick do you use to involve everyone from the team into the conversation at the beginning about, for instance, establish the agreement among coach and team? It's a big question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know if I can answer all of the parts of that question. But one thing that comes to mind, as we were working with a co-coach with a team where there were 3 German leaders, the CEO, the CFO, and the HR director were German, but the team is Hungarian, and they're here in Hungary. And as we were doing the interviews and the initial phase, we noticed that there's a lot of tension between the leaders and the team, and there seems to be some unaddressed topics. And so we had one day with this team before they signed us on for a long team development program. And so we decided with my co-coach to start with sharing some vulnerabilities and to model how we are opening up towards them without really knowing them. This was our first engagement with this team. But we both, in the beginning, it was a full day online. And in the beginning, we both shared something really personal about what we need to leave outside the door, what is in our focus, and we need to leave it outside the door before we can really be present and engage with the team. And it was absolutely fascinating to hear how, after the 2 of us shared, first the leaders started sharing their own really deep personal thoughts about where they are, right? Everybody is in the middle of COVID, and there is a lot of other things going on. And so the team immediately dove into this space, and it was just very tangible how they were craving to be able to connect. So that was maybe one example. Leading the way by example is what almost always works for me. I'm not always clever enough to figure out what the example should be. So that's where I have a lot of learning to do, is noticing where I can really lead the way. But once I figure that out and jump in, I feel that it opens up a lot of space for people to follow.
Thank you. Thank you for that extra answer to this question. and very honest and sincere answer. We need to stop now, and I would say, first of all, thank you so much, Amina, that you took your time and your precious time to share your own stories and connect them with the new team competencies. Really exciting and a lot to learn. And I think we all are curious on how can we make it more visible what we're doing in our team coaching based on these competences.
Right. I really, really encourage you all to sort of move into these competencies and stretch around and figure out where you fit with them and how they fit with you. And I hope we can have another conversation down the road and see, what our experiences are. We're all learning about this. So I really appreciate you spending this hour with me. And I hope you have a beautiful evening and lots of team coaching engagement. So we have a lot to talk about down the road.